guys, we're here today with Larry Zavadil and Wayne Martin, probably two of the best cold callers in our entire company. Larry having founded this company on being a good salesman, and Wayne has a pretty extensive background in sales as well. So welcome to the podcast today, guys.
Cool, thank you. Well, I don't know, maybe we're good cold callers because nothing ever sticks and we got to keep making cold calls.
That's right. Or she looked at us, Larry, and I think she thought, well, you're the two oldest guys in the room, so you must have the most experience. So,
Yep, you got me. You can see right through me. So, I guess we've heard this story a little bit just from, jumping into our DAs, but Larry, he kind of talks about as he was thinking about founding the company and, just some of the things that you would do to practice being on a sales call and how to make yourself a better salesman. Could you maybe talk a little bit about, kind of some of your methods for improving yourself?
Well, when I started with NCR, they always tried to teach us, and they say, oh, you got to carry a check in and say, we do checks, or you got to push a product. And all the places I went, whether it was rural or metro, I really tried to sell a relationship, and I was really trying to get in the door because they don't know me from Adam because they've never met me before, and so I was trying to create that interest-creating statement, and so I always would say, well, I'm not here to tell you how you're going to buy from American or Larry, but how would you like to? You haven't been holding your breath waiting for me to show up. Because you got relationships, the stuff we sell, you're buying from somebody already, and so you really have that in place. But there's got to be something that they don't do right. It's nobody gets it right. You don't have somebody that can do it. It's always a problem for you. Well, give me that hard stuff because anybody can do vanilla. If I can do a hard thing, I can add value, and then I get value back, and I prove value, and so you get a chance. So that's really what I sold was. Not a product or even the company. It was more about a relationship and being a solutions person, being an employee without being on the payroll, being somebody that would be the answer person, somebody the fix-it person, somebody they could hand stuff to and get it off their desk. And so that's the unique thing about the products we have. They are like toilet paper. It's stuff people buy every day, they use every day. It's just different cycles, and you got to get to know those cycles. So, and customers would rather work with somebody they like than somebody they don't like. There's a few customers in my career that I found that I had to put up with an attitude or a personality that was a little bit negative. But I also found out if I could find a way to do that, I was one of the few salespeople that kept showing up and putting up with the BS. And so you kind of take the yin and yang and look at it. And I always had one Ray Nikoski at Herberger's in St. Cloud. I tried giving it away to Dan and at NCR and then later at American because that was the only account I had there. But Ray would buy everything from me, but he was just a whiner and tough to deal with. He'd beat you up all the time. And so I'd give it to Dan, and within 6 months we'd lose all the business, and so I'd take it back and get all the business. And so eventually I called Ray he was my humility pill. Every time I felt good about myself or I thought things were going really well, I'd go see Ray, and he would bring me back to earth. So I think that's as you go through and you develop these relationships with customers, but it all started with a cold call because I didn't have any accounts. I just knocked on doors. But I made cold calls. I'd said my first year to 2 years after that, it was all referrals. I was always going someplace where somebody sent me. But you got to do that cold call first of all and get it started. And I see, a lot of people, I hate to do that. I hate to knock on doors. And I said, why? Is it the rejection? Well, not that so much. I said, well, think about it. You have absolutely nothing. You have zero today. You don't have an order. You don't have a relationship. You have nothing. They don't know you. You walk in the door. What's the worst thing that can happen? You walk out with nothing. Well, that's what you walked in with. So you really didn't lose any ground, And so when you think about it like that, it's not so scary. It's not so threatening because I entered with zero. I left with zero. I moved to the next one. But the good thing is 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, if you do it right, you get a second audio, you get a second visit, you come back and see them. And some customers will want you to come back 3, 4, 5 times before they say, this guy's not going to go away. Because there's a lot of salespeople show up once, never go back. And so it's that stick-to-itiveness. It's that always showing up and always being there. And being that, proving that you are that answer person and you are that employee without being on the payroll. So that's all I always liked about it. It says, yeah, it's on, you've got to knock on the door, but you always got to remind yourself that this could be really a good person. There could be really something cool here, and maybe they just wait. And every once in a while, you hit them on the right day. Boy, I'm glad you stopped. I'm having this problem, and nobody can fix it. Those are golden. But if I didn't make that call or stop, that would have never had that opportunity, because just sitting back waiting for the phone to ring isn't going to happen because they don't have my phone number. But the other thing I found too, and then we always heard this at NCR, and I'm sure that Moore told Wayne the same thing, is that the last call of the day at 4:45, it could be your best call of the day. You had nothing, and make that last call. Don't quit early. And so that's where we developed a saying that was from 9 to 4 with the customer in the field, in their office, and from 4 to 9 at night, doing your orders and doing the stuff at home for the customer. And then Saturday mornings. So that was the old days when we had to draw copy and all this magical stuff today. I don't know how they do it, but we did it with colored pencils and grid paper, right?
We definitely did. We all had drafting tables, and we had all the pens and pencils and all the layout charts. We talked to younger people about that today, and they don't have a clue what we're talking about. But that was really good, what Larry was just talking about, because that's where it starts. We all start somewhere, typically without a whole lot handed to us, and we got to go out and do some digging, and we got to knock on doors, and we got to make things happen. So rather than being redundant, I'm going to talk about the other side of cold calls, which to me is one of the keys, and that's preparation. Okay, doing some homework. In the old days, not too long ago, when Larry and I started, we called it smokestacking. Because you didn't have the internet, you didn't have all the tools that you have today. You would just get in your car and you'd drive down the road and you'd look for a big building. You'd look for a smokestack. And if there's a smokestack, it must be a big building. It's a plant or something, and it's worth going in and checking it out and maybe knocking on that door. We had things called block cards before the internet, and you had a card for every single customer. When you knocked on the door, you'd write down the information and you'd go through your block cards, and that was part of your preparation. Luckily today, none of you have to do that. The new version of smokestacking, you can still drive down the road and look at stuff, but when you find it, maybe before you knock on the door, and you can do this right from your smartphone while you're sitting in the car, jump on the internet and go take a look at, put your Dick Tracy Columbo, Larry talks about being Columbo, put that investigator cap on, and let's go find out what we can about this particular company, who they are, what they do, what they look like. You can go on most companies' websites and you can get the history of the company. You can find out what they do. You can find out what their products are. You can take a look at their upper management, and a lot of times they've got pictures, because if you know who you're going to be talking to or asking to talk to, a little more of a comfort level there. You can kind of mentally prep for that. But you get a feel for the company, the culture, what they're like. It helps you kind of think about, how am I going to spin my call when I go in there, what I'm going to talk about. But there's also a really good chance that when you walk in, if you get to talk to somebody, the fact that you know a little bit about them, that you did some homework, it might impress them. And you really should be thinking about doing that, because I can guarantee you your competition probably is. So whether it's a cold call, whether it's a presentation, I think we did a podcast a little while ago about, presentations and prep for that, and we talked about some of the same things. But do it on your cold calls too, because it's so easy today. Larry and I didn't have that, so you just kind of walked in the door, like he said, what's going to happen? Worst case scenario, you walk out and nothing happened.
Did you guys ever get nervous?
I think you're probably always nervous. That's just like when people say when you get up and talk in front of people, when you get up on stage, no matter how many times you've done it, how many years you've done it, I always get a little bit nervous and anxious, don't you, Larry?
Yeah, I think that it's just anticipation. If you don't, I don't think you're human, or I don't think that you're going to perform well, because it's a part of that process. I think athletes, actors, they kind of all do that. They all kind of go through their own little routines and stuff. But you got to have butterflies a little bit. What I found is that the best time to make cold calls is when you're running hot. I always say either running hot or you're running cold. If you're running hot, you just keep going, because what hot means is you got orders. You're on fire. Everything is going right. You're in one of those cycles. And you don't want to turn it off, because it's hard to turn back on again. And so those are the kind of things when you got a lot of success going, pressure's off. And customers can sense that. You're relaxed, and you're coming across a whole lot different than if you needed an order. Because customers know when you need that order, you're walking in there, you just seem depressed. Your chemistry and your body is just sending the wrong signals, and they pick up on that, and it's negative. Where if you're relaxed and it's kind of like, I don't need the order, I got a lot of orders. Oh, I want to work with this guy. He's successful, and so it's just attitude and body chemistry, body language, and I think that's where you kind of get in that. And so when you get in one of those funks, or you're down or whatever, don't make any calls. I mean, they used to tell us at work today, if you're running cold and you're having a problem or a bad day or whatever, go in the office and do paperwork. Because all you're going to do is scare people away. You're going to send the wrong signals, But don't be doing that every day, because then you're going to lose your job, So, but I think those are the kind of things you got to figure out what your routine is and what your stick is, like Columbo. What's your process, or what makes you tick, or what makes you work, and everybody's got their own, and how you go about your business and how you make those calls. But yeah, like smokestacking, so you drove into all these small towns I'd look at, they all got banks. They usually had a clinic or a hospital. Then, up and down Main Street, they had commercial industrial. And with NCR, we sold guest checks. So we always had hospitality and restaurants. So you could really sell just about anybody on Main Street. And they would do that. After a while, you'd hit the top ones in the city, and then you come back that second time and you start hitting secondary ones. And so when you build that 8-week plan that we had, you had some people you saw every week, some people you saw every 2 weeks, every month, every 2 months, and then you had some people that ordered once a year that you just saw once a year, or you just called them on when the tickler file came up. And so those are the kind of things that you learn how to plan your work and work your plan, and how you manage your territory and manage your calls.
It's your milk route, right? That you always talk about.
Yep.
So, back to Taylor's question on do you ever get nervous? I think one thing that helps, I agree with Larry, because I think you're always a little bit anxious, you're always a little nervous. Once you get rolling, it usually gets better. But, kind of back to that prep thing again, if you've done some of that prep work that you can do so easily today, because you can go to their website, you can go to LinkedIn, you can go to Facebook, creep on them a little bit, learn what you can about them, because if you know what you're talking about, if you're going to feel better. So that nervousness, whether it's a cold call, or you're getting up in front of somebody, or a presentation, stick to what you know. So if you did some of that homework, then you're going to feel a little bit better quickly, in the process, of meeting with somebody and having that conversation, and just knowing what you're going to talk about, because you studied up on them. You know who they are, what they do, what kind of products they have, what might their problems be, what might their needs be. We always talk about, through discovery, understand their needs, and then what's the right solution set of products and services I can bring to the table to help that particular customer. So that all goes into that prep work. But the bottom line is, you got to do the work, you got to do the homework. You have a lot of tools to do that today to make the job a little bit easier. When Larry was running hot and cold, one thing that ran across my mind was, maybe to run hot longer is, we all gravitate towards certain types of business, whether it's hospitals or banking or automotive. So, study up on those customers that are kind of your sweet spot, what you like to talk about, because again, that's going to make you more comfortable. If you're really into automotive, understanding that world, that market, and then who's selling in the automotive marketplace in my backyard. That's gonna probably make me run a little hotter longer because I'm going in talking to people that it's in a comfort zone of what I like to talk about, and I get excited about that. So I think that's an opportunity that's out there for all of us. Find out what your sweet spot is. What do you like to talk about? What kind of customers do you want to focus on? And go after those customers.
Sure. Yeah, because new people will come to Glenwood and at a DA and they say, God, we can sell all this stuff. Where do I start? And that's part of it, is that you got to find a product. Okay, you like promo? I mean, all the younger people are starting in that because it's like shopping every day. It's right, Christmas every day. And so you got all these ideas and what have you. So start with that and go into it and start working on that. Then you'll feel more and more comfortable. But when you build that relationship with the customer and you've done that, then look around and say, well, we can do that. We can do that. And then you start to broaden into other categories and other products. But the biggest thing about, who we were talking around but haven't talked about is, in Wayne's preparation, is practice. Practice your story. Practice what you're going to say. Once you understand that person that you're going to call on, and you know their background, how long they've been at that company, where they were before, you find out some little things about them. Now you can carry on a conversation like you're not strangers. You don't. But practice. And my wife used to always yell at, who are you talking to? And I'd be in the shower, but I'd be rehearsing talking to myself. I'd be mowing the lawn outside, and I'd be talking over the lawnmower. And so I would go through, even if it was a product. With NCR, we had delivery problems. We had scheduling issues. We had things that we didn't have control over. So I had to rehearse what my story was going to be and what my solution was going to be. And I was doing that while I was mowing, while I was in the shower, while I was doing other things, talking to myself. So I always said you got to do these things enough, and you put, when this walk into the customer and a situation pops up, you can pop that cassette in, and this is number 5, and that's your answer. And you just kind of plug in customer here, and you kind of say, well, here's what I've done before. Here's a solution or an idea, because you've already practiced it. And that shtick you have, the Columbo thing, you do it enough and you rehearse it enough, it becomes a part of you. And now it is like popping the cassette in and having all those answers right there for you when you need them.
Sure.
And I can tell you guys, that Larry practices what he preaches, because we were trying to find him for this podcast. And Taylor's calling him. He's like, I'm in the bathroom. And I had just been in the bathroom, and I heard somebody talking when I was in the bathroom. And we've heard that at the home office, too. So I think Larry was practicing for this podcast while he was in the restroom, because we're at the Minneapolis End User Show. We're getting ready to go. So we're all here in the same place. So he definitely practices what he preaches.
Oh, yeah. Gladys would say, well, where's Larry? Oh, he's in his office dictating. And I would take my little dictaphone, my little recorder, and go in the bathroom.
And we'd go walking by, like, we'd hear something, and it's like, what is that? Oh, it's Larry doing his dictation.
Is that a crazy person that wandered in, or is it just Larry practicing?
Because it was a nice, quiet place.
Sure.
And then a lock on the door.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you guys have already kind of hit on a lot of different topics for this, but just wondering if you guys have some really simple ways to establish trust immediately, because, sometimes that's kind of an issue. If you're just some Joe Schmo coming off the street, it's important to make that customer trust you right away. Are there certain things that you make sure that you do?
Well, I think that if depends on when your cycle is. If it's the very first call and you just started working a city in an area, you have less to fall back on. There's where you got to have the research and the preparation, so it gives them a feeling like you know something about them. But if you've been there for a while and you already have customers in town, and that's the referral thing. If they're an IBM user, you just say, well, I'm working with Sam over here, and they're an IBM user, and they told me to come call you. And that's how I always did the referrals, because when I had a customer in town, I would say, is there somebody else in town that buys this stuff that I sell that you know? And they'd always, if they liked you, they'd give you 3 or 4 or 5 names. And so, and if they were an IBM or a Burroughs or an NCR user, they all knew all the other users in town that had that same equipment. Sure. So that's where I would get the referrals, and they'd say, yeah, well, Chad sent me over here, and I'm saving him money. He thought maybe I could save you money.
Nice.
And then just having that name referral.
Turn it
You know.
into a warm call instead of just
Yep.
a random person coming in.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. You had a reason to be there because somebody sent you there to save this guy money, right?
Yeah, and I think it's so much easier today to do that homework preparation.
Right.
What Larry's just talking about, who else is selling to what other customers in the community? There's 600 of you out there. You've got, just in our sales resource group, you've got 40 resources available, SOS and all the other departments that, give us a quick call and say, hey, who do you know that's doing this or that in my area or for this type of customer? And let's have that conversation. We'll share with you what we're doing. What kind of products, what kind of services, what kind of technology, because it could lead hopefully into a program. So you've got a lot of resources to help you brainstorm before you walk into some of those calls. But if I'm walking in and I'm going to have a meeting with Larry and I've never met him before, and if I walk in and just say, yeah, tell me what you guys do, Larry could easily think, I'm not going to talk to this guy. He didn't spend 1 second researching American to find out what we do. So as easy as it is to get that information today, it's also much easier to shut yourself out of a call because they know instantly if you did any of that prep work. And if I'm looking at it and I've got 5 people walking in the door today, all want to talk to me about my print or my promo, who's going to stand out? Who's going to differentiate themselves? So think about that. My last thing would be, how are you going to differentiate? Because we know we've got thousands of competitors. So when I get my chance and I get, I work up the nerve to walk in and knock on that door and talk to the people, am I going to be able to differentiate who I am and what I do, so that they may want to talk to me, they may want to buy from me more than the next person walking in the door?
Sure. So my final question for you guys is totally your own opinion, but so we have an incredible group of salespeople, and they're all very talented and they specialize in their own vertical markets. But do you guys think that a good salesperson is born or are they made?
Oh, you definitely have hunters and you have farmers, and hunters are harder to find than farmers. And what that is, it's two different works, two different actions. A hunter loves the thrill of the hunt, chases the deal, puts the deal together, wants to does everything to make it happen in making it be a sale, but also how is it going to look and what's the benefit of the customer. You bagged them, now you got them, and that's what I would say. Well, shit, now the work starts, because now you got to do it. Now you got to perform, do everything you said you were going to do. Now you got to do it. And so that's where the true success that we see with these bigger offices and people is where you have teams. You have the hunters working with the farmers or account managers, or people that can come in, build a solid relationship throughout that organization, because you need to get deep. You can't just be calling one person, because that person get fired, could move on, be gone, and now you're at risk again. The new person coming in is going to have their own friends and relationships and aren't going to know who you are. And so if you have the support of all the people on C-level and all the support people in that building, and everybody knows your name, like Norm at Cheers, that new guy coming in has got to fight a big battle to get you out of there. And so get deep, so the hunter can still get deep and get into it, but pretty soon, a hunter doesn't like daily routine, doesn't like to write orders, doesn't like the daily monotony of doing the business. That's where he'll get an account manager or support people to really do that, because they do it well and they can focus on it. And then he can go out and find another one to hunt. But every company that, no matter what product you sell, has that same thing. Some people are hunters, I think, are more born than they are made, because they have certain instincts, they have certain personality traits, they just have a certain attitude or motivation that's different, that you kind of don't learn. You can't teach it. You can say this is what it is, but if you don't have it, you don't have it. Or I think it's easier to become a farmer or a support person or penetrate the account. That's just a lot of hard work and sweat. and doing it. And again, it's plan your work your plan, and stick to it. So I think that's the differentiation between the two, and that's what makes sales what it is. That I always look for people that it's their personality. If I told the kids when they were going to school, said, do the best you can. You don't have to get straight A's, but do the best you can. Now, if you're going to learn two things, learn people skills and common sense. Because if you have common sense and you have people skills, you can figure the rest of the stuff out, and people will give you, get out of jail free card. They're going to work with you because they can see those traits.
That's great.
That was some really good feedback. I liked what Larry just talked about, and especially those last two things. I think in the old days it was definitely a clear line between who liked to knock on doors or who could do the knocking on doors and deal with the rejection and all those things. And then typically the person that's really good at that and building the business, growing the business, is not very detail oriented, doesn't like all the minutia of handling it and managing it and the things that Larry talked about, what comes after you get the deal. And that's where that account manager comes in, and they typically are really good at that. And most of us kind of balance ourselves out. We might be, that's probably who our husband or wife is. If we're on one side, we get a spouse that's on the other side, so that we kind of balance things out. That's the way it is in my household, including the checkbook. I haven't seen that for 30, 40 years. But it's understanding what you're good at and accepting what you're good at, being comfortable with that. Those account manager people don't usually like to go out and knock on the doors. They don't like that. So surround yourself with the right people. But I think one last thing on that in that regard is coming from More Business Forms, which was a print company, one of the largest in the world, but we didn't do all this other stuff that American does. And when I joined American, I'm looking at it, I'm like, those people coming to DA, and they see all the different products and all the things that we can sell. And a lot of them start to what do I do? How do I focus? And they get overwhelmed. And we tell them, like Larry said, find that one thing that kind of lights your passion. What's that one item, that one product that you really get excited about, and take that product into the market. Because if you're excited about it, if you believe in it, it's a great, great starting point. And then you can go into anything from there. But if you walk in and they know that you feel good about what you're doing, you know what that product is, you're going to have a better shot at it. Yep. And that gets back to that differentiation that I was talking about. So,
well, in your career and your future is going to be directly related to your own self-education. So you've got to go to our website. You've got to go to the associate section of the website. You've got to attend webinars. You've got to go to breakout sessions at our meetings. You just got to attend and participate. A lot of people will go to Orlando or go to Vegas and they don't go to a breakout session, go to a very few events or anything, and you can look at their sales, and it's on cruise control. The same sales for the last 25 years. Are they really committed to their customers? They think so. I don't think so, because you're not going to bring it. They don't bring in no new ideas, no new technology, nothing. And they just wait for the phone to ring and take orders. Well, that's fine if that's their life and they want to do it. It's not fair to the customer, and definitely not fair to the company and the rest of the people trying to make it work, because they're representing all of us when they go out there, because we represent each other every time we make a call, and we represent our company and who we are. And so if we don't do that to its fullest, then we're shortchanging somebody. But that's life's choices, and that's a yin and yang in our model. Like I say, sooner or later, your model, one of the greatest things we have is the freedom, the ability to do whatever in our model. Now, that's a strength, but sooner or later, a strength always becomes a weakness. And in this case, it's a weakness.
Yep, and, a huge strength, I think, of working for American. I mean, Larry and I, and most of you all come from some larger companies. I'm blown away every day by the amount of resources that are available to our sales associates, by simply picking up the phone and asking for help. When I talked about going to the website and things like that, every single day, probably 6 to 12 times a day, we have a rep on the phone, and the first thing we do is jump on the customer's website that they want to talk about, so that the whole team can do what I mentioned a little bit ago. But having those tools, having those resources available, use them. Everything Larry just talked about, all the things that are available to you, so that you continue to learn about who we are, what the products are, what the technology is, that's only going to put you in a better position. We have, right now, before we started this podcast, we've got 2 young sales reps that didn't know anything a few years ago, made a cold call on a customer, involved SOS. We went in on an RFP and then presentations, and probably a 2-year process of getting them up. We've got ACES programs in place. We've got a lot of products. They've grown their business by hundreds of thousands of dollars with this customer, and they started knowing nothing, but they called the right people. And today they just walked in and they brought the customer with them to the end user show. And they said, before we take them out and walk the show and look at the new products, we want to sit down with the SOS team and we want to talk about a site refresh. We want to talk about what are other companies doing where they've already solved what we think we want to do. And they're sitting out here right now in the bar because it's 10 o'clock in the morning and nobody else is in the bar. And that was the quietest place. And Samantha Tucker from SOS has got her computer there. They're showing all the sites. They're doing that kind of work. And that is so cool to see this whole process that we've been talking about, being, go out and knock on the door. Don't be afraid. Then utilize all your tools, all your resources, and keep doing it. These guys, in my mind, they're back to square one today. But they're $400,000 down the road in doing the process. But now they're going to be in a position to significantly grow the business. So don't get on cruise control like Larry talked about, because this world is changing so fast today that great relationship, those people, there's no guarantee any of them are going to be there tomorrow. And that's happened to us over and over again. It's like, oh my gosh, this just happened. I have to start all over. But that's okay. If that happens, go back and replay this podcast and do everything we just talked about and start over.
Yep.
What a great way to end this podcast, Wayne. I love that.
The best way to end it is everything begins and ends with the face in the mirror. Period.
I love that.
Yep.
You say that a lot, and it's a great reminder to a lot of our reps out there and everybody at our home office. So
Taylor doesn't have the money, Wayne doesn't have the money, Larry doesn't have the money, the customer's got the money. Let's figure out how to solve their problems and get it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on this podcast. As Larry knocks our mic over, we went the full episode without it falling down, and now it's coming down. But thanks for being on the podcast today. You guys have been super helpful, super knowledgeable.
Cool.
Let's get out there.
And I got to tell you guys, that is where I found Larry, was in the bathroom, and he was standing in front of the mirror. So he was doing the face in front of the mirror and practicing for the podcast. Take care. Have a great day.
Bye,
Go
guys.
sell something.
Thank you for being with American.